live now.
Looks that way.
The YouTube.
Yeah.
Should we wait a second or should we just?
It's 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone who may be out there to our gazebo in our backyard in Winfield, Illinois. We're coming to the gazebo today because the black walnuts are falling from the trees and we have our infant with us, and it's been kind of terrifying with these giant walnuts falling down. So we're here. We might be interrupted very shortly by a preschooler. Since COVID and quarantine started, we haven't had any childcare help. And so we have 2 boys who are here. Avery's just coming on in to say hello.
Well, say hello. Say hi. Hi, Internet. Now go back to your show, buddy.
It's YouTube TV.
But I cannot see any.
We don't know who's out there.
Yeah, we don't.
Isn't that weird and interesting? Okay, so we're going to have our meeting now. Thank you.
So the people?
No, we're not going to see the people.
Right.
We'll tell you all about it later, okay? So things have been a little hectic. But we're here today to introduce to you my body of work almanac for shade gardeners that Western Exhibitions is featuring as part of Exhibition Weekend, Expo Chicago's big online fair this weekend. So let's start talking about that.
Sure.
So
I'm the husband.
Oh,
Eric. Hi.
Eric, I'm sorry. I'm Jessica Labatte. Did I introduce myself? Probably not. Eric May, my husband, director of Roots and Culture, also an artist, our chef around here, and ultimate papa. Anything else you want to say?
I don't know. Should we talk about where we live?
Sure.
Okay. We should note that this was billed as a garden tour, but it's late September, and while it's lovely, and we're getting some bursts of color with the leaves changing, flower-wise, there's not a whole lot to show, except what we've got in our vase here today. It's actually mostly wildflowers. We've got snakeroot and asters and goldenrod, and these are hostas because it's the suburbs, so you have to have hostas. So yeah, there isn't much to see. A lot of wildflowers are on the perimeter, but it's nothing we've grown ourselves exactly. We tend to them, but
yeah, they're all things that have kind of wandered in. So, but we'll talk about the garden. We moved to this place, Winfield, Illinois, which I'm sure many of you have never heard of, in 2015 because I got a full-time teaching position at Northern Illinois University. We had lived in the city for a long time at Roots and Culture together in the apartment above the gallery. And I was doing that commute, and it was just a really awful commute. So we decided to move somewhere a little bit closer.
Split the difference.
And we found this house. The house was owned by someone who was a cabinet maker before we bought it. So they had built out a big studio in the basement, and it sits on a very wooded lot. So you can see the forest behind us. There's lots and lots of trees, black walnuts, and there's a big linden tree that grows through our deck.
And we're super, super grateful and fortunate to have this space during this time in the pandemic, because especially with the 4-year-old, we have ample outdoor space, and I mean it's grounding and centering. I never thought I'd want to move to the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs, and you know we were pretty urban folks and started and nurtured our careers there, but you know the lure of the woods and nature was a big attraction for me. And now it's just, I just feel like we're so lucky that we get to have this space right now. So I'd like to thank the land.
Yeah, totally. I agree. We are very lucky. And we've learned so much from the space here. I have been into plants and gardening for a long time. I tended the garden at Roots and Culture when we lived there. It's that front garden when you come in. But it was all containers. And once we moved here, we actually had space to start to garden together. And Eric, you never really had an interest in plants until we moved here.
Not much of a green thumb. You might know that I'm a chef, so plants and the way things grow have always been an interest of mine. And I'm not a great gardener. My joke is that I can take $40 worth of tomato plants and produce $4 worth of tomatoes. So it's a very shaded property. So there's actually good foraging to be done. But back to flowers, when I worked at Oxbow, the last few years there, I did all the flower arranging because I would buy flowers at the farmer's market. So I just sort of got it. I found it to be a very sort of meditative practice, and so flower arranging was something I always did on the side. And I'd say that my skills as a gardener are more aesthetic or curatorial than actually understanding the care that it takes to nurture the plants. So, but Jessica's a natural green thumb, so I think that we make it work. And I'm constantly learning. We'll talk more about specific plants and flowers in a bit, but there's so much here to begin with. So like the wild stuff, the native stuff is very interesting and important to me. And another joke is that when we have a brand new baby and we've had less time to weed, so I've kind of been appreciating the weeds more. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But we kind of just let things go this summer, but it's also, I don't know, it's
wild. Our neighbor came over and she said, "Oh, so you really like the wild look." And it's true, we do like a little bit of wild.
There's some fairly primped green lawns in our immediate vicinity. Some neighbors keep it. Behind us is woods, but that's someone else's property. So it's very, very wild on this side, but if we turn the camera around, you'd see freshly cut lawns.
Yeah. Well, so Eric mentioned that our lot is very shady. So maybe I'll start talking about the work there. Once we moved here to this house, I had this new teaching job. We had a kid. I went through all these really rapid changes and felt really kind of overwhelmed and lost with where to go with my work. I have always relied on a lot of finding of objects to inspire the work in the city. I collected a lot of trash or things from alleys or different stores, and I was kind of destabilized here in the suburbs and felt like I had to start, finding new inspiration. And I decided I would take some of the advice that I always give to my students, which is to use whatever you have, what resources you have available to you. And so we have all these resources here. So I started looking around me in the yard more. I was also tending an infant, and so I didn't have long stretches of time to go to the studio. Even though I have a studio in the house, I could really only go during nap time or in the evenings, even with Eric's support, because I was nursing. And so you have these 2-hour windows where you can be free, and then you have to go back to the infant again. So there's this kind of regular cycle of caretaking that happens. And so I was thinking about motherhood and this new place where we are and gardening and the plants and how to make all those things be a part of my work, but not in a cheesy way, because, photographing flowers could be so cheesy. Making work about parents and children could be so cheesy. So I was trying to look through art history and look for examples of women artists who addressed being mothers or, making work about caretaking for their children. And of course, you go to the feminist artists, but there was kind of a schism in 70s feminism artists with ones who were supportive of mothers and ones who wanted women to really step away from motherhood in the domestic space in order to have freedom to be artists. So I kind of wanted to generate a body of work that would find a new place for being an artist mother. So that's where this work started to come from. And I was thinking about the shade in our lot. It's really shady. There's all these trees. So once the leaf cover comes in, you can't grow any of the big full sun perennial plants.
No sunflowers.
No sunflowers. Our neighbor down the street has some, and they're so beautiful. We're all so jealous here. So you have to really work with really shady plants. And I really liked this idea that there was like shade as this metaphor for exclusion or judgment that I was feeling for trying to become a mother and an artist and juggle all these things, because our society doesn't make it very conducive for women who are working to also have children.
And make art on top of that.
And make art on top of that.
Artists always have that third, thing that.
Yeah, right. You have like the art career and then, whatever other career you might have, which is teaching in my case.
And family.
And family. Yeah. So, yeah, thinking about the shade and the shade garden at this locale. And which makes it really hard to grow things, right? Because you don't have a lot of sunlight. Another thing about our yard, it's the soil. You were just trying to plant some mums in the front garden.
It's clay full of rocks.
Clay full of rocks, so very hard. You have to like do a lot of work to amend the soil so that it is better for plants. And then the other thing, we have all these beautiful black walnut trees. But black walnuts are a very territorial plant, and they, both through their roots and through the walnuts that drop, there's a chemical that gets into the soil to kind of protect their area. So there's this like aggressive, what's the right word? Way that the plants are kind of protecting their own territory.
So the roots almost form like a protective barrier where things don't really grow inside that zone very well.
Yeah, and so there's kind of black walnuts over here and over there and over there all along the property, and they're great, beautiful trees, but they also, you have to be really selective about what plants to grow. Like the tomatoes you were mentioning, tomatoes and black walnuts don't always jive together. They don't really flourish, so.
But we've discovered shade-loving perennial plants, which, are fairly idiosyncratic and unique and not, I joke about hostas. I actually have a love for hostas now, but there's so many varieties and they're so hardy and drought resistant, and, you can count on them to, provide, accents around your yard all summer long. But lots of weird plants I never really saw before. We started shopping, and there was our pretty good plants when we moved into the house. Someone a previous owner was a careful gardener, and the bleeding heart in particular is sort of our signature plant that grows in May, right around my birthday, which I love. But yeah, we have like 4 or 5 varieties of those. And if you don't know the plant, it's sort of low-lying. I sculpted Jessica this necklace. This is what a bleeding heart flower looks like. They're very, very complex. They look quite a bit like a female reproductive organ. And they grow in sort of multiples on branches that hang. So the little flowers dangle, and they're very delicate. And yeah, I'd never seen those before, and they're growing everywhere happily.
Yeah, they're my favorite. They're so beautiful. And when the bees come over to pollinate them, they go up inside the heart part, and it's like they're kind of wearing the flower as a hat. Oh, they're just so beautiful. And sexy.
Yeah.
Like kind of really sexy plants.
The foam flowers are really unique.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a ground cover. It looks almost like a maple leaf that grows almost all year. It's evergreen, but for a couple weeks in late May, they sort of sprout. They look like kind of little miniature like albino pine trees almost. But they grow in mass, so it just creates this sort of like, I don't know, sort of shimmering white field. Really pretty. And we love some of the showier, standard perennial flowers. We can grow peonies and we can grow irises, and some of those feature in a few of my favorite photographs of Jessica's from her show 2 years ago.
And the more recent ones that
Yeah.
are up on Western's website.
Yep.
Yeah. The irises we got from a neighbor who left them out beside the road, and we brought them into our yard and planted them, and they really took off.
They're remarkably easy to grow for how fancy they look.
Yeah.
But they also don't last very long.
They don't last very long at all. They're so fleeting.
Which is a major aspect of appreciating flowers. And so Jessica produced a catalog for the show, and I interviewed Jessica in real time in the gardens. We have a tradition of garden walks
with a cocktail.
with a cocktail.
After the kids are in bed.
Although with the
That doesn't happen anymore.
we haven't done any garden walks together at least this summer. But yeah, so we talked a lot about time in that interview, and I find flowers sort of melancholic in a way. There's so much anticipation and so much joy, and then they're so fleeting. So I don't know. I feel like since living here and getting into flowers and becoming a parent, I've embraced melancholy in a way, and I think that's embedded in this work. We also talked about how there's a sadness watching your kids grow up, right? I mean, that's kind of a cliche that you hear. They grow up so fast. But, like, speaking in terms of mindfulness, like, it's so important to be present and to cherish each moment. But it also becomes melancholic looking back a little bit because, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat things and say kids are wonderful 100% of the time. Memories tend to sweeten things. But there's definitely, especially in our like photo crazed era where we all have cameras on us all day, we're constantly documenting the kids, and we look back a lot. And so I don't know, do you want to talk about photography's relationship to time and the melancholic? And
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I was thinking about time a lot when I first started making this work, when we were making this work. Say we, I guess, because you've been so supportive and giving me space to make the work, and we make the flowers together. But so the series is called Almanac for Shade Gardeners, and when I was making it, I was really thinking about time and this work being like a calendar, but this calendar that was for me or people like me, or people who are trying to like push against mainstream narratives. And how I would make the work is that I would wait until a flower would bloom, and then I would use that flower as the impetus to make a photograph, and I would collect things from around the house, things that were objects we were playing with that day, or little pieces of trash that maybe I was like focusing on in the beautiful morning light because we get up at crazy early hours with a little kid. And I would bring all those things down to the studio and compose the still lifes. And so it was kind of a very rigorous process where I felt like I was accountable to the flowers. And so whenever they would bloom, I would have to photograph them. And sometimes I would cut a bouquet as I was playing with our child in the yard, knowing that that would be this extra time pressure to get the picture before it wilted. So it was in some ways a sneaky way to ensure that I was always getting my studio time that I needed, because I had to do it when the flowers were there. But it also really related to the way it felt to take care of a child, where I was turning myself over to someone else and taking care of their needs first before a lot of my own needs. And on this schedule that was like relentless and exhausting. And then the photographs, of course, they preserve the flowers forever. So then you look back on the time that was in the photograph and the collection of objects, and it really becomes a marker of that time in our child's development, that time in our life. And then the cycles of the years now have accumulated. So this is the third summer I photographed from the garden. And last summer and this summer, I wasn't as rigorous as I was that first summer. It was more kind of flowing and intuitive, because now we have 2 kids and it's a lot more to juggle, and we're working from home. But it's been interesting to see how when the flowers come up each year, like what different things are happening in our lives in that time. And this year in particular, it's been really interesting because we've been home and there have been flowers that I've never been able to capture, like the bloodroots, that this year, because we were stuck at home, I was finally able to capture. And they're such a beautiful little flower. I wrote about them on the website, so I don't have to repeat everything I said there, but the bloodroots were one flower that I was able to capture while I was home. The goldenrod, I've never been able to capture. Yeah, so that's been an interesting other part of time that we're experiencing right now, this different kind of time that is quarantine time.
In a way, like, I don't know, it's very much magnified in quarantine, but you know what we've noticed as parents, that your days, especially at home with the kids, are very long, and time in real time feels very slow. But then when you sort of reflect, time seems like it's gone by in an instant.
Yeah.
And, so I feel like everyone's getting a little bit of a taste of that now.
Yeah, totally. Like what it feels like
Right.
to have an infant and you're stuck at home and you can't go very far. And
But it's definitely amplified for us too.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't had help other than short little visits with the grandparents. You know, our kids been home from school, and we both have been working remotely. I'm off teaching this semester, thank goodness, but it's a lot to juggle. We definitely need more support for working parents. We need more childcare that's affordable. It's hard.
And safe.
And safe, yeah. Yeah.
So another topic I brought up in that original interview is sentimentality, because you know there's so much of that embedded with us when we're looking at your work, and I know that a lot of those narratives are they're embedded in the work, but they're not necessarily immediately accessible to the audience. It's clear that there's child's toys and accoutrements of parenthood, and I think people can reach certain sort of interpretations with flowers and time passing. But we talked about how sentimentality is kind of at least when I was in grad school 10 years ago, and I think you would agree, very much frowned upon and as a mode of working and content. And I feel like, I don't know, again, to speak to like, there's the the present is so urgent right now, and the future is very urgent too. I feel like the past is a place that's safe and maybe uncritical in a way. I feel like during these times of struggle and crisis right now, I personally look to the past for a sort of comfort. But on the other hand, I also feel like sentimentality is wrapped up in personal narrative, and I think that our subjectivity and narratives are super important right now. I think that we might see a shift in re-evaluating the role of sentimentality and personal narrative in art, because individuals' experiences and stories navigating this fractured world we're living in, I think are more compelling than academic exercises and the avant-garde and the meaning of science. Like, let's talk about our experiences in life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think 2 years ago I was so resistant to you bringing up the word sentimentality with this work. I was like, don't, that's awful, horrible. But you've said personal narrative, and I think that is where I feel like the work is operating now, is it's letting the personal narrative be in the work, not in a hidden way. Like, because there was always personal narrative in all my work.
Yeah.
But I was probably like not comfortable revealing it. Partially because like it was frowned upon as like something that might be too feminine, or
right.
not intelligent enough, or not academic enough to be talking about your personal life, which is really silly because we've had the personal as political for like way longer than I was even alive. But anyway, that's what it was like in academia. So I do think that personal narrative is a spot that is exciting for artwork moving forward, because it's a way that we can have different experiences of various people and challenge different master narratives. And in thinking about the work, that was something that was really important to me. We had a little spill over there. They happen all the time. What was I saying? Weeds, big narratives. Yeah, the work. With this series, I left all the dust on the film, which is like a big photographer no-no. Like, you usually retouch the film, because I'm shooting everything on 4x5, I should mention that, and scanning the film, and then with those scans, you get all these little particulates of dust on the images, and you always retouch that, and I felt like that retouching process was creating these like false senses of perfection for the images in our lives, and keeping the residue and all the dirtiness and the little like contingent and specific dust particles was really an important part of the work, and also related to how we started to shift how we thought about the weeds in the yard. We are bordered by some very pristine yards, Eric mentioned, and people are neighbors are really not hesitant to comment on how frequently you're weeding or not weeding. This summer, our neighbors said, wow, you really like the wild look. And we're letting the wild look go, but not just because we're too busy with an infant. We've also decided that a lot of the native plants are just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than the plants you would find at the garden stores. They are more resilient and developed for these landscapes, obviously, and don't require the kind of watering or amending of the soil that we might have to do for, more domesticated, cultivated species.
I've found that I'm not going to get too tangential here, but I feel like there's metaphor to be found in our relationship to plants and our in terms of our relationships to groups of people. So for me, like, I don't know, weed is a derogatory term, right? And if you sort of readjust your thinking and respect the plants that are especially are native, like it's a way to I'll use the term desettle our not only our land but the way that we our relationships to the plants, flora, fauna, and the people that originated and called this place home. I think it's interesting to know that Kentucky bluegrass, which is the plant of the suburban lawn, it's emblematic of Americans, and but it's also introduced, and despite its name, it's actually from Eurasia. And so I sort of like see the symbolism in that, and and invasive species too. I've done a lot of work with that in my own practice, and like they change the ecosystem, and there's sort of this idea of like this original state, this precious original state of the earth, but it's typically human intervention that has caused invasive species to populate. And I mean, I think you could consider European Americans invasive species of this country, right? So I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of metaphors and social political metaphors in our relationships with plants these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been researching that yourself. Do you want to talk about your lawn?
Well, yeah, we have a lawn, and I mow it occasionally, but
you'd never mowed a lawn till
that's true.
we
And
moved
I
here.
actually, there's something therapeutic about it, but I mean, I hate belching all that, the combusted gas into the atmosphere to tidy up and fit in with the neighbors. But there's, I think, a little bit of Kentucky bluegrass out there, but we really don't weed. And this summer is a little unfortunate because there's this plantain, which is a weed that actually has analgesic properties. It's good for bee stings. It's kind of taken over, but there's, I like to think of our lawn as multicultural. There was a good piece in the New York Times a few years ago about this. Like, so we actually encourage weeds that flower and offer, are pollinators. So, our yard contains clover, and it contains
wild strawberries.
the interesting thing about those wild strawberries, though, they're invasive. It's a fake strawberry.
Yeah.
They're really little, and they grow all summer. They're kind of pretty, but they flower, and they encourage bees. We're very pro bug around here too. Maybe that should be your next
pro bug.
No, that could be your next series of work.
Or I'm less pro bug than you and Avery.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the bugs I like, the spiders, as long as they're outside the house, but the stink bugs and the cicadas I don't like very much. I like the sound of the katydids and the tree crickets, like the fireflies. Those are all great.
But yeah, we try to promote a very diverse and active ecosystem on our property.
Yeah.
We got a cooing baby over here. You can't hear.
Yeah, and the wind chimes and the kid playing basketball across the street.
Oh, I should plug the mixtape before we move on. I made a playlist which is available on the Western Exhibition's website. It's been interesting because I kind of keep a rolling playlist that I coordinate that's inspired by Jessica's work, and
you've made mixtapes at like significant moments in our history too.
True. But the specific playlists about your work, if you probably know Jessica's previous work, and I mean this relates to the shadow plants that were in your last show, but the more abstract work, inspired me to make really like kind of abstract electronic mixtapes. It's the kiddo. I've got to go help with the show.
Okay. We're letting Avery watch Netflix right now. He doesn't know how to control the computer quite yet, but there's no way to avoid TV time with the kids right now. Like, it's the only way that like you can get some sort of mental space to be able to write an email. So we've been very liberal with it, which is not how we were at all. We didn't even have a TV before this.
We got a TV for quarantine.
Yeah.
So the playlist. So this playlist for this work is kind of a shift. I've introduced lyrical music, and there's themes of seasons and color and chroma and light. But the lyrical music has a sort of a melancholic vibe, and relates to what we're talking about with the passage of time and sentimentality. It's a little gothy at times and a little dreamy, and there's also quite a bit of ambient and new age sounds because I think they relate to some of the tranquil passages in your abstractions, but they're also those are sort of trending music forms right now because they're calming and our nerves are on edge constantly these days. So I introduced lyrics and narrative and vibe. So you should all check that out. You'll recognize some of the music. I'm embracing Enya, for instance. So.
Who would have thought, Enya?
I'm a 90s kid.
Yeah. Well, thinking about what you just said about being present and something being calming, I don't think I said already, but that was something that I was really doing with this work, was thinking about how I could be very present with my child while I was taking care of them and appreciate all the beauty in our home or in the little things we were playing with or exploring in the yard. And then when I would go to the studio, I would compose a still life that would try to capture that beauty. So there was like multiple levels of like mindful attentiveness, both in like how I was attending to the child, how I was observing and paying attention to the things in our domestic space, and then the composing of the picture. And I really love to read lots of different books. And I found this essay by Bell Hooks right around this time that's, oh my gosh, just based on the name, Aesthetics of the Ordinary, Beauty in the Everyday. It's in a book about Black feminism. And I would highly recommend reading it. She really talked about how you could approach observing and appreciating beauty in the everyday as a way to be anti-capitalist. And I feel like we all need a little bit of that, like being present in the beauty that surrounds us as a way to kind of get through this crazy pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we not talked about?
Any specific plants?
Things that are blooming right now. Well, these are all blooming right now.
Yep.
What else is going on in the yard? We got some pokeberries.
Right.
That are
poisonous.
And
Avery put one in his mouth when he was about a year and a half.
Yeah. That's...
And I want to shout out Jenny Kendler, my good friend and amazing artist. She's taught me so much about wild plants and foraging. And she was kind of on speed dial that year when Avery was 2 because he ate a Solomon seal berry. Jenny, what's going on? How bad is this pokeberry gonna be? but he's really learning a lot. I'm an avid mushroom collector too, and Avery's very cautious and respectful with what he defers to me. And yeah, we go on walks in the woods all the time, and he loves picking wild berries, and he's starting to learn what's up. There's a big difference between a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and a 4-month-old.
The 4-month-old who is here is tired of sitting in his little chair and now would like to join us.
This is Heron, our youngest.
Yeah, he's wearing one of our tie-dyes. This summer we did a lot of tie-dyeing, jumped on the ice dyeing bandwagon that so many people on Instagram were into. Yeah, plants, learning the plants. That's been something like this time with Avery being home, we've been really able to share with him that he wasn't getting at school. That's like one of those like bright spots, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
He's
been obsessed with the burdock.
The burdock, yeah, he'll point out burdock everywhere, and he'll want to dig it up.
Yeah, we were weeding that heavily in the spring. It is native, and it's kind of pretty. It's like it kind of has that elephant ear, big leaf sort of structure, but it has kind of a thistle-like flower that turns into those big, like burly burrs that get all over your clothes, and you pull at it, and it it breaks apart into a million little prickers. So yeah, we have it. I like to selectively weed, so I kind of like build zones. I almost feel like that's my green thumb is like sort of respectful weeding. I curate the native plants.
It's true,
Yeah.
And you've done that. We have a patch of violets behind our house that we kind of weeded everything else out, but left the violets that were there.
They're native wild violets, and they're lovely. They last for like a week.
Yeah.
In May.
But this year we made a violet syrup from them. That was something we were doing.
We were all
a lot.
about the cordials. We've got a couple really large elderberry bushes, and the berries have medicinal properties, but they have like almost no sugar, so I don't find them very palatable. But the flowers are really aromatic. And Jessica, when she was pregnant, started to drink this cordial, non-alcoholic elderberry cordial, or elderflower rather. So I hacked up a bunch of our bushes and made cordial that was really delicious, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Avery's really obsessed with spruce tips too, so we made a spruce tip cordial. Not super like aromatic. It has a little bit of the kind of like piney soap edge to it, so that one wasn't my favorite. But Avery was, helped me forage most of the spruce tips, and he was proud of it, so we let him drink it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
We do collect the black walnuts, although if you know the work, what's the title of the piece?
Dowsing dormice.
Dowsing dormice. So we have kind of the kiddos out talking to us. So I was collecting walnuts and sort of storing them in the basement, and we started to have a pretty bad mouse problem, and they were really hanging out in Jessica's studio, and
not a great place for.
Jessica made a wonderful still life with the gnawed open walnuts. So I try not to keep them in the house anymore, but they're really delicious. They're incredibly hard to harvest. They're a huge pain in the ass. There's like a fruit that's really hard that you have to, remove, and then getting inside the walnut, I have this kind of like hydraulic like lever that cracks them open, and then to scoop the nut, the nut doesn't come cleanly out of the shell. They're very expensive to buy retail because I think there's so much work to harvest, but they have a really, really, really amazing sort of fragrant sort of flavor. They're great in cakes.
Yeah, I have a really good black walnut cake recipe that we've been talking about. Hey, be careful of my pretty chair, please.
We have a lot of mulberry trees, although they didn't really fruit this year.
Yeah.
I think you sort of you thought that it was the April snowstorms.
Yeah, I think the April snowstorm, because we didn't
Messed up
see any
the flowers.
mulberries around town either. And we usually make a mulberry pie in June, but we didn't this year. But
Avery
this year,
loves those too.
yeah, he does. And you'll see in one of the pictures, it's called creeping phlox spots. There's this little stain on the paper, and that is from a mulberry that got squished.
Right.
It has this really pretty blue, purple.
That is a good one.
Yeah, and in the dowsing dormice picture you were talking about, you can see that the mice, this was my favorite part about that image, there were two locations where the mice were kind of hoarding the black walnuts, and they had these different techniques for how they were opening them. One would carefully eat the whole way around the walnut, and so it was like a perfect like half. And then the other one would eat these little holes kind of sporadically, like polka dots around the walnut. So that was kind of interesting.
I can't believe their teeth can get into those.
I know.
You can hear the squirrels munch on them, and it's this like kind of mechanical scraping sound. I think they're working on the shell.
Yeah.
We have a ton of rodents around here. But we also have a ton of birds of prey too, which is really cool. There's broad-tailed hawks that, I mean, I've seen them perched on our deck before. And then we have, which is really amazing, one of my favorite wildlife aspects of where we live. There's been nesting couples of long. Why am I blanking?
Great horned
Great
owls.
horned owls, yeah. And yeah, they've been hanging out this summer too. We've heard them hoot often when we're having little Zoom parties out here. But yeah, they mate in January, which is really interesting, and they're really noisy then. And I've seen them a couple times, and it's really incredible. But I think they're drawn to our property because of the rodents, and the rodents are here because of the black walnuts, amongst other things. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've covered like a lot of the great topics.
Yeah, we have.
There's a link in the comments to the website. If anybody has any questions, they could put in a comment.
Mhm.
Otherwise, this kid has a dirty diaper.
Does he?
And that other kid is coming over to say hello again. He's getting used to the Zooms and wants to know why there's no people here.
Yeah, that's right.
It is
This
a little
different
odd
format,
to
yeah.
be talking to the void.
Hey, bud.
Why?
Blue line. Oh, that's the light on the camera.
Why?
It lets us know that it's
Well-
on.
If you have any other questions, contact Western Exhibitions. I hope you all enjoyed our little garden chat. It was fun, and I think we'll say goodbye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers, everyone. Enjoy Expo weekend.
Yeah.
We'll be here taking care of these kiddos.
They didn't
They didn't say anything.
Hi.
Do you want to say goodbye?
Hi, they
You
didn't
say-
say.
And Avery doesn't always wear a white collared shirt.
Why are you dressed up like this?
Because I am a vampire, but I need the cape and the bow tie, and I have them.
Yeah, I made him a vampire cape and a bow tie, so he's been wearing it every day.
Yeah, it's pretty adorable.
And I need a vest.
Yeah, I still have to sew the vest. So, on that note,
All right.
good to see everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Why did I don't say anything?
I'm gonna look at this.
Rhythm's not real.